Okay, team, are we ready?
We are, council member.
All righty. All right. You can hear me fine? Okay. See if I can not be so much in the background. Okay. I think that's okay. Well, good morning. I'm at-large council member Anita Bonds, chairperson of the Committee on Housing and Executive Administration. The time is 11:02 a.m. on Monday, March 7th, 2022. We are meeting virtually via Zoom to convene a public hearing on Bill 24-0457, the revised Uniform Law on Notarial Act Amendment Act of 2021, also known as RULONA. Okay, this legislation was introduced on October the 20th, 2021 by Chairman Mendelson at the request of the DC Uniform Law Commission. This hearing is also streaming live and recorded on the committee's YouTube channel named HEA Committee. This global experience of COVID-19 has highlighted some major challenges that the community faces, as well as some not so commonly known areas of concern, such as notary services. As participants of a global economy, I am certain that some of us have encountered the need for notarial services to certify the authenticity of our signed documents. Traditionally, we were required to appear in person with a valid identification bearing our photograph and sign our documents in the presence of a commissioned notary public. In the early stages of the pandemic, we all had to shelter in place, avoid any human contact, but business transactions could not actually fully stop operating. Residents of all ages needed various documents authenticated by notary, but services were limited due to physical distances, illnesses, mobility issues, non-physical presence in the same locality, and many other hindrances. Before us today is a bill for remote notarization authorizing. It does a notary public to certify a paper copy of an electronic record is an accurate copy of that record. To accept a paper copy of an electronic record that is certified by a notary officer, and to perform a notary act for an individual who is not physically present before the notary officer or the public, including an individual who is outside the district but within the United States, and an individual who is outside the United States through the use of synchronous communication technology to verify the identity of the remote individual. Evidenced by an audio-visual recording or by remote administration of oaths and remote notarization of tangible records, evidenced by an audio-visual recording. In the past and even presently, many people who are not able to appear in person to have their documents notarized will face serious challenges and difficulties. As time progressed, there are some mobile notarization services that are available on call. However, that still does not solve the problem for people who are bedridden or not physically within the same locality. Accordingly, this legislation welcomes a modern approach of remote notarization through virtual platforms without anyone being in the same room or even the same city. We have heard some strengths and challenges of this legislation and possibly its implementation. So I look forward to hearing from all the public and government witnesses regarding this very important issue. I ask that everyone keep their remarks today to 3 minutes or less if you're testifying as an individual, and 5 minutes if you are testifying as an organization. This way, we allow our witnesses, all of our witnesses, the opportunity to be heard. So with that said, I'll take note that the entire witness, entire list of witnesses should be sure to submit written testimony so it can be a part of the record. If you have not submitted your testimony, please email it to housing@dccouncil.us. At this time, I will recognize any of my colleagues that may be on with us. Okay, perhaps some may join us a little later. So thank you. We'll now call the first panel of public witnesses. And Amelia?
Yep, we have Evan Lukadakis, Associate Government Affairs of DC Association of Realtors. Curtis Ziegler, Managing Attorney for Woodland Estate and Title. Amy Klein, she's in place of Mike O'Neill. She is the President of DC and Land Title Association. And then Roy Kaufman, who's a public witness. And they're all in the room.
Right. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Lukadakis.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's a tough one. It took me a while to learn it myself. Good morning, Chair Bonds, Housing Committee, and staff. My name is Evan Lukadakis. I'm a Ward 6 resident and a staff member at the DC Association of Realtors, DCAR. We are the state-level association representing over 3,000 realtors, real estate professionals, home buyers, sellers, and homeowners in the district. DCAR would like to thank you, Chair Bonds, for holding this public hearing. I'm here to offer DCAR support for the revised uniform law on notarial acts. At its core, remote online notarization, RON, provides flexibility and access to individuals seeking notarial services. It is an immensely helpful tool for underserved and unbanked communities where notary services are not readily available because of the absence of traditional providers like bank branches or lawyers. The pandemic underscored the critical need for certain government functions to utilize a virtual option. Without Zoom, access to council meetings would have been a logistical nightmare. Numerous public witnesses have stated that they've never been able to participate in council meetings or the legislative process, but now they can with a virtual platform. RON provides that same flexibility by removing barriers to entry. Moving on to how this legislation works in practice, a notary and remotely located individual clients meet virtually using communication technology. This could mean a virtual platform like notarize.com or notarycan.com. Think of these as the Zoom or WebEx for RON. These types of platforms connect notaries and clients via any web-enabled desktop or laptop with a webcam or via any smartphone or tablet. Before the virtual face-to-face interaction, documents and IDs are uploaded and identities are verified. The verification process, or identity proofing, is a process or service by which a third person provides a notary public with a means to verify a client by a review of personal information from private or public data sources. This legislation requires two forms of identity proofing. One common method is knowledge-based authentication, which offers the client specific questions that only they can answer. A potential question could be a multiple choice asking you to identify a street you previously lived on. Once the client's IDs have been verified, the signing procedure begins. In some cases, the client signs the electronic document with an electronic signature, and the notary signs the notarial certificate with an electronic signature and seal. What's ironic about RON is that states and locals typically look to the district for policy innovation. But regrettably, we are behind on utilizing this tool. The only states that have not enacted nor are considering RON currently are Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Rhode Island, and Delaware. Half a dozen states, including DC, are considering RON. To understand how RON is implemented in our neighboring states, I spoke to realtor title attorneys who have experience executing online notarization. Virginia enabled RON in 2013, Maryland in 2020. Before the pandemic, they had hardly any online closings. Now they're processing over 400 per month. And this is one firm I'm referencing. They've also expressed that RON through identity proofing is a more effective method at detecting fraud than in-person notarizations. To conclude, as always, DCAR appreciates your leadership, Chair Bonds, and the committee for working to improve the quality of life for district residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Now, Mr. Ziegler.
Yes, thank you, Chair Bonds. My name is Kurt Ziegler. I own and operate a title company, Woodland Estate and Title. I'm a DC resident, and Woodland Estate and Title is a DC company. This is very important legislation. It closes the gap in what now is open to interpretation. As a settlement company, we are routinely having sellers close using RON. However, some title insurance carriers do not recognize the interpretation. They don't recognize that DC gives full faith and credit to, let's say, Virginia. And so some title insurance carriers won't allow us to close using RON. So this causes a lot of disruption to our settlement services. I either have to switch carriers or I have to mail the documents out, and then those old folks or whoever's selling has to go down to the bank and get in front of a notary. So it's very disruptive to our business operations, and it's also disruptive to the convenience to the sellers. DC, everybody is everywhere. People are traveling, people are out of state, people are out of country. So at a practical level, boots on the ground as a settlement company, this is huge for us and huge for the residents of the District of Columbia in getting settlements and properties passing hands where really everyone makes money. The district makes money, sellers make money. And so it's very, very important. As Evan had mentioned, for us as a business, it's helped us scale because sellers are now online. You can do it a lot quicker, and really is helping, business and as well as the residents here in the district. So certainly as a local business owner and resident and one-day seller, I highly support this legislation, and it will bring us up to speed with Virginia, bring us up to speed with Maryland, as Evan mentioned. So really appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Ms. Klein?
Good morning, Chairperson Bonds and members of the Committee on Housing and Executive Administration. My name is Amy Klein, and I am the current president of the District of Columbia Land Title Association, also referred to as DCLTA. Our immediate past president, Michael O'Neill, who actually speaks nationally on matters of remote online notarization, was scheduled to testify today, but unfortunately has fallen ill and is unable to testify. So I thank you for allowing me to testify in his stead. Today, DCLTA testifies in support of DC Bill B24-0457, Revised Uniform Law on Notarial Acts, Amendment Act of 2021. DCLTA's membership consists mostly of title insurance underwriters, title company owners, and employees. During the past 2 years, our members have had to become very creative with the methods they use to conduct residential and commercial real estate closings. The traditional closing with buyers and sellers meeting in the office to sign closing papers and exchange keys was no longer possible, and quite likely it may be gone forever. Very few buyers and sellers actually demand to be at the table together anymore. Remote online notarization became a tool for title companies in the region during the pandemic. Virginia, as it's been mentioned, adopted remote online notarization in 2011, and Maryland's remote online notarization law went into effect on October 1st, 2020. Additionally, to fill the gap between the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic and the date Maryland's RON law went into effect, Governor Hogan had issued an emergency order authorizing remote online notarization. This was not the case in DC. The council made attempts to authorize remote online notarization on a temporary basis, but the requisite mayor's order authorizing RON never materialized. The district's businesses and notaries have been at a disadvantage due to DC's lack of remote notarization. For title companies in particular, as Mr. Ziegler just touched upon, the waters have been unclear. Some title insurance underwriters will insure transactions that involve DC property when an out-of-district remote notary is used, and some will not. Current DC law does recognize notarization conducted in accordance with the laws of jurisdictions in which the notarization took place. The council has the opportunity to clear the waters regarding the use of remote online notarization and to join the 39, possibly 40 states and counting that have adopted permanent legislation authorizing remote online notarization. To my recollection, the push for remote online notarization started to intensify about 5 to 6 years ago. As underwriting counsel for a title insurance company, a former settlement attorney in the district, and a former DC notary, when I first heard about RON, I was skeptical. I had conducted hundreds of closings face-to-face, during which I would notarize documents and review individuals' identifications. Questions such as, how was RON going to be safe? How would you know the person really was who they say they were when you're not in the same room as them? Quickly percolated to my mind. The more I learned about RON, however, the more I realized that RON security's features were far superior to my ability to determine whether a document was fake or not, and that the person before me really was the person who they claimed to be. RON uses technology that can read the information embedded in one's identification and uses a multi-factor approach to authenticate signers, tools I, as a notary, simply did not have. Additionally, when RON is used, there is a digital audio-video record of the notarization, a significant step up from the copy of the photo ID that went into the records that I maintained of the closing. The need for RON existed prior to the pandemic and will continue beyond the pandemic. DC's population is unique, undoubtedly more than in many other jurisdictions. Our residents, due to the nature of their employment, be it with the military, State Department, IMF, etc., are often called away from the city for significant periods of time. Additionally, DC's population is much like every other jurisdiction, where finding a notary is difficult. Getting to the notary for a face-to-face notarization may be even more difficult. It may mean taking time off from work or traveling out of one's way, and that's presuming one does not have mobility impediments that would complicate his or her ability to travel to the notary. Remote online notarization is a solution to these obstacles. DCLTA's written testimony touches upon the simple regulatory methods other jurisdictions have adopted to implement RON. As this is Michael's areas of expertise, I defer to the written testimony he submitted on DCLTA's behalf and other esteemed panelists that are much more steeped in this knowledge than I am. In summary, DCLTA believes remote online notarization is good for DC consumers, notaries, and businesses. DCLTA supports Bill B24-0457. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And now, Mr. Kaufman, we'll hear from you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council and staff. My name is Roy Kaufman. I'm an attorney here in the District of Columbia with about 40 years under my belt of real estate practice. I used to own one of the largest title companies, and in that capacity, I've conducted or have overseen maybe thousands of real estate settlements. The committee will hear testimony from the National Conference of Commissioners of Uniform State Laws, who will testify about the very careful and deliberative steps that they've taken before they produced and promoted this legislation. The record will also reflect that remote online notarization is tried and true functionality. It's adopted or considered in the vast majority of states, yet the district remains the outlier. Appended to my testimony is also a letters of support from the DC Bar's real estate section, the American Land Title Association, and the Mortgage Bankers Association, and the latter being particularly concerned about the security measures involved. There was testimony just recently from Mr. Ziegler indicating that some of the title underwriters were hesitant to accept RON in its current state, and I would point out that it is because there is a inconsistency in the law. In the law that was passed in 2017, and that was Act 22-0457, it said specifically that personal appearance is required. It said the signature shall appear personally before the notarial officer. It is that inconsistency that has given some underwriters pause in authorizing any transactions that include remote online notarization in the district. The Mortgage Association has through its organization called MISMO, which passes its standards, has developed very careful and again rigorous requirements for online services that are utilized by notaries or by people to conduct the online notarization. I understand that the district's secretary will be testifying that the district needs time. And I would ask that the council please be wary of that request. As Ms. Klein indicated, there have been 4 or 6 laws already passed promoting or authorizing remote online notarization, and none of them have come to fruit because of the district's failure, despite prodding, to issue either a mayoral order or regulations. The proposed bill at line 134 requires that notaries must notify the secretary's office that they will do notarizations. Other states do that through an email notification, etc., but it does not require the secretary to pass regulations. And if the secretary were so inclined, I would hope the secretary has had time to do that since the passage of those other 3 bills. And also there are off-the-shelf regulations through MISMO, through the Mortgage Bankers Standards Organization, that are ready to be adopted. So I would ask the council to please somewhat be cautious. And the last thing I would like to throw in is that it is time to adopt the provision that eliminates the raised notary seal and allow for images of a notary seal, as most states have done, for the reasons I've set forth in my written testimony. And I thank the council for its time. I thank the chair, most importantly, for her introduction, which I could incorporate by reference here. And that's all I have to offer as testimony. I stand ready to assist the council if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Many thanks to the panel. I think one of the things we will have an opportunity to do with our government witnesses is to examine a couple of important points that has been made thus far. One, what happened to the implementation of the emergency law, et cetera, and why we are at a point where somehow there is conflict, as you mentioned, with the requirement for personal signature, which is in Bill 22-471, which is contrary to where we're trying to go and the system that we were able to use during the pandemic. So we'll be asking questions about that. I don't have any questions of the panel other than this is very important to your industries. And I wonder if you have had conversations with the secretary's office or with the administration about why the delay or why no implementation or lack of implementation, if any of you have or your organizations have.
Well, Madam Chair, I have had the pleasure of speaking with various deputy mayor's office. I had the pleasure of speaking with Judy Gold of the secretary's office. She was kind enough to give me more than an hour of her time, and we discussed this at great length. I think that there were some limitations on her office's abilities. She had mentioned that they were just now trying to adopt a computer program that would assist in electronic notarization, which is different than RON, by the way, but there's some overlap, of course, and that some of their resources were not available to what she thought were the resources necessary to pass this legislation.
All right. And so with ROM, what is the acronym for ROM? Let me make sure.
Remote online notarization, Madam Chair.
Okay. Remote online. Okay. All right. So now that system is the one that makes the audio digital recording of the transaction, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you're saying that there are other systems that do not do that. And so your discussion with the secretary's office was particularly about ROM, or is it just having the ability as the original law stipulated?
Madam Chair, I didn't really say that there were others that didn't have that. There are two
Okay.
different kinds of procedures. One is called remote online notarization, that's RON. And then there is remote inked notarization, which is called RIN. RIN is a situation where the signer actually signs a piece of paper remotely and then sends that piece of paper to the notary. The notary who has watched the execution is comfortable. The notary then takes the original, affixes her seal, and then sends the document on to the title company, whomever. So there is RON and RIN. This bill provides for both. And our discussion was basically how we could, at that point, the discussion was how we could move forward with the legislation that had been passed in the past about remote online notarization.
All right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I understand the two and what the capacities, and what may be the division. I know Mr. Ziegler was explaining how important it is to just really get this done, for the sellers in particular and the buyers as well. So I wanted to make sure. So thank you very much for your testimony. And thanks to the DC Association of Realtors. I know this has got to be very, very important to you as it is for the Land Title Association. So thank you all very, very much. All right. We will now move to our second panel.
Sorry. Panel 2, Councilmember, we have Raymond Pepe, Uniform Law Commission of Pennsylvania, Kim Dudecki, AVP Government Affairs of Notarize Inc., Brittany Kitt, Associate Director of ARPDC, and Tina Nelson, Managing Attorney of Legal Counsel for the Elderly.
All right. If you will let them in, we'll get started with the second panel.
They should all be in now.
Okay, I see two.
Yep.
Okay.
So you should have 4.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome everyone, and still good morning. We'll start with Mr. Pepe. You are on mute.
There you go.
Okay, all right, there you go.
Give it another shot. Good morning. My name is Raymond Pepe. I'm a member of the Pennsylvania delegation of the Uniform Law Commission, and I'm a partner with the law firm of K&L Gates. I served as a member of the Uniform Law Commission's drafting committee that developed the revised Uniform Law Notarial Acts in 2010, and served as the co-chair of the drafting committee that developed the amendments to the revised Uniform Law Notarial Acts that the committee is now considering that authorizes remote notarization. The District of Columbia adopted the revised Uniform Act in 2017, but omitted provisions of the act which authorized online remote notarization. I respectfully recommend that the district adopt Bill 24-0457 because it expands notarial services to individuals who cannot, due to logistic or healthcare reasons, travel to and be in the presence of a notary. And it also facilitates an emerging class of financial services that are being widely made available that can be provided wholly or partially through electronic communications. Because current district law provides for the recognition in the district of notarial acts performed outside of the district under the laws of other states. This bill also prevents notaries in the district from being disadvantaged in offering their services in comparison to notaries in other states. The failure of the district to enact a remote notarization law makes the district a distinct outlier. Currently, 40 states have enacted remote notarization laws, and legislation is currently pending to authorize notarization in at least 5 other states. While others offering testimony previously to this committee have done an excellent job in describing the legislation and its benefits, I'd like to assure the committee that, in my opinion, if the district goes forward with this amendment, they'll be adopting the most carefully vetted and thoroughly drafted remote notarization law available. These amendments were developed over a 5-year period involving at least 8 1- or 2-day drafting committee meetings open to the public and review by the full membership of the Uniform Law Commission in 3 different years, in 2016, 2018, and 2021. In addition to members of the Uniform Law Commission, others who participated in the development of this law included representatives of the American Bankers Association, the American Bar Association, the American Land Title Association, the American Society of Notaries, Freddie Mac, the Mortgage Bankers Association, the National Association of Registers of Deeds, the National Association of Secretaries of State, the National Notary Association, the Property Records Industry Association, and the U.S. Department of State. Contributors to the development of legislation also include multiple vendors producing software and technology products used to implement remote notarization, and officials from several states, as well as several major financial institutions. Thank you for the opportunity to offer my thoughts about this legislation, and I'd be happy to assist Commissioner Mackay when he testifies later, answering questions about the legislation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your testimony. Now we'll hear from Ms. Dadecki.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and members
Good
of the
morning.
committee for allowing me to testify here today. My name is Kim Gaedeke, AVP of Government Affairs and Community Engagement at Notarize. We are a digital trust provider connecting consumers and businesses to notaries public performing remote online notarizations. Notarize has been in business since 2015, and since our founding, we have prided ourselves in being a trusted resource to our government partners. To date, we have partnered with over 30 states to implement RON laws that keep consumers safe and maintain the integrity of the Notarial Act. In addition to the written testimony submitted to the committee, I would like to talk to you today about the safety and security standards included in B24-0457 designed to mitigate fraud. First, the personal appearance requirement and identity verification. DC's proposed RON law still requires a signer to meet with the notary public. With RON, this is satisfied by meeting with a notary over a secure 2-way audio-video connection. With RON, a signer's identity is verified in one of 3 ways: through at least 2 forms of identity proofing, through a credible witness, or a notary's personal knowledge of the signer. I want to briefly address common concerns raised over the identity verification process. In the event that a signer does not have a DC or federal ID, or their credential has expired, the signer can still complete the RON process by satisfying either the credible witness or personal knowledge requirements. This allows lower income and elderly communities to take advantage of the benefits of RON while maintaining high standards for identity verification, even if they lack reliable access to their credentials. Additionally, we do not support a requirement that a signer have a cell phone number for identity verification. This requirement is not currently included in the legislation, and we encourage the council to maintain that position, as well as remain technology neutral in any regulations promulgated by the Secretary of the District of Columbia, including when establishing the permitted identity proofing technologies. Today, the industry standards for identity proofing are knowledge-based authentication, KBA questions, and credential analysis. But the aforementioned approach will allow the Secretary to permit new technologies as innovations become available. Second, the benefits of electronic documents, tamper-evident technology, and electronic record keeping. By authorizing DC notary publics to utilize electronic documents, tamper-evident technology, and an electronic notary journal, RON will provide both consumers and the notary with a thorough record that far exceeds what is maintained today in the traditional paper process. When a notary applies their seal and digitally signs the document with a digital certificate, they are making that document tamper-evident, ensuring its integrity, and making any modifications to that document made after the fact obvious and provable. With RON, the notary must maintain an audio-video recording of each signing session. This record is a crucial fraud mitigation tool. If a transaction needs review, an AV recording is available. An AV recording will show how the signer acted and sounded and the circumstances surrounding their signing of the document. This level of fraud mitigation is not available in today's paper records. To close, I'd like to leave with the following. In addition to the safety and security measures I just highlighted, RON technology vendors, like Notarize, also adhere to additional standards and compliance regimes in each jurisdiction or business scenario in which we're engaged. These standards often require vendors to implement additional security measures, including the implementation of an audit trail. An audit trail creates a chronological list of all critical actions taken from when the document is uploaded to a platform to when the document is notarized. The audit trail is embedded in the document itself and can be viewed with all common PDF readers. To date, roughly 38 states have passed similar laws authorizing notaries to perform RON, including your neighbors in 2012 with the first RON law in the Commonwealth of Virginia and thereafter the state of Maryland. B24-0457 provides DC with an opportunity to offer notary publics a safe and secure way to perform notarizations remotely, and we encourage the council to pass this legislation. Thank you for your time and consideration of this issue, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have, and will do my best to address each one at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. We'll now hear from Ms. Kitt.
All right.
All right, Ms. Kitt.
Good morning, Chairperson Bonds
Good
and
morning.
members of the committee. Good morning. And housing, well, the Committee on Housing and Executive Administration, sorry. AARP appreciates the opportunity to offer testimony on the revised Uniform Law and Notarial Acts Amendment Act of 2021. My name is Brittany Kitt, Associate State Director for Community. I am presenting testimony on behalf of older adults in the District of Columbia. Again, we support this bill. In recent years, more and more business, professional, and personal activities have taken place digitally rather than solely on paper. Additionally, the COVID-19 pandemic has heightened the need for physical distancing and thus the importance of remote notarization processes. Digital and communication technologies have enabled more of these activities to occur remotely. Remote online notarization enables individuals to execute estate planning and other documents requiring notarization while remaining remotely located from the notary and even from witnesses when they are required. Older adults have been a high-risk group for COVID-19, and the virus has heightened many people's awareness of the need for estate planning services and for the execution of documents such as health and financial power of attorney, wills, and trusts. Remote online notarization legislation will permit individuals to notarize documents without going to a notary's office, expanding the traditional process which requires the notary to be in the room to witness. Because physical proximity to others increases the risk of COVID infection, this process allows safe physical distancing through verbal acknowledgments by the signing party that they understand, 1, the content and purpose of the document, 2, that they signed the document, and 3, that they signed it willingly and without coercion. Once signed, the notary fills out a notarial certificate, which the notary signs and affixes their seal. Notaries also enter details of the notarization in the notary's journal and requires the notary to have an audio-visual recording of the entire remote notarization. and to retain the recording. This journal process has often been a requirement under state law and is widely endorsed as a best practice. Even as restrictions in-person contact ebb and flow, the threat of infection continues, and there is an increased recognition generally that virtual channels make a variety of transactions safer and easier in many ways. While the utility and convenience of remote online notarization is clear, especially to older individuals who may not be able to travel to a notary's office, for example, those in nursing homes or who need to get Medicaid documents or healthcare decision instruments notarized, AARP recognizes the critical importance of guarding against fraud and financial abuse. In fact, the key goals of notarization are to ensure the document signers are who they say they are, that the individuals appear to be competent, and to confirm that the individual's acts were made knowingly and voluntarily. AARP believes this bill establishes processes and guidelines to preserve the integrity of the notarization process and to protect individuals signing documents. Although the bill does not totally remove the risk of undue influence or fraud, notarization can never fully eliminate these threats. The safeguards here are a significant step in the direction of safety and access. The bill addresses many of the concerns by AARP when remote notarization issues were raised in 2020. The revised Uniform Law and Notarial Acts has been adopted in 17 states since it was adopted in 2018, and several more have opted into this legislation as amended in 2021. AARP believes it's time for District of Columbia to join this wave. It is important for vulnerable adults who reside in nursing homes and those who are homebound to finally have full access to estate planning and power of attorney services. Such services, no doubt, will give them peace of mind. I thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm more than welcome to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Now we'll hear from Ms. Nelson.
Good morning, Chairman Bonds and members of the
Good
committee.
morning.
I'm Tina Nelson, Managing Attorney at Legal Counsel for the Elderly, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today in favor of the passage of the Revised Uniform Law on Notarial Acts Amendment Act, as we affectionately called it, RON. Prior to the pandemic, LCE offered free in-person notary services for our client community. We also frequently traveled to nursing homes and visited homebound seniors. This allowed critical estate planning documents such as wills, powers of attorney, and new deeds for homeowners to be executed. When our physical offices closed in March of 2020, our capacity to directly assist with free notary services decreased. LCE and our pro bono partners have had to rely on mobile notary services, and some notary publics charge exorbitant travel fees, and oftentimes these services come at a cost that are unaffordable by our clients. Additionally, many of the senior clients do not feel safe inviting strangers into their home, and they don't have access to safe outdoor locations to conduct signings. RON will assist many low-income seniors with mobility issues and limited finances who have difficulty traveling to participate in in-person notary signings. They can also utilize witnesses who are in different locations because some of our seniors don't have family or friends in the area. RON will also be particularly beneficial to persons who reside in nursing homes, who are homebound and unable to leave their home due to disabilities. And when public health emergencies arise, such as COVID-19, then those individuals will still have an opportunity to have such documents notarized. LCE understands the concerns that exist regarding the potential for undue influence with RON. But we feel that with appropriate specialized e-notary training and other processes and guidelines put in place, such as are indicated in this legislation, the potential will be greatly reduced. There is a requirement that there is a recorded video call, which will have an audit trail of the signing. There will be questions about the personal identity challenges, and that will help also further indicate that the person completing the documents are those individuals. To strengthen RON even further, LCE encourages the council to adopt other policies such as a signer with an expired license being able to have their identity confirmed by a third party who also has valid photo ID. And we also encourage the cell phone requirement, which is imposed by some of the major RON software companies, to be adjusted, or that other measures be put in place, because those are potential barriers that would prevent many of our seniors from receiving the benefits of RON. And so there should be other methods available to them as well. As noted previously, this would also bring DC in compliance or in line with many other states in the country, including Maryland and Virginia. And for those reasons, we support passage of this bill, and I'm available to answer any questions that you might have, Councilman.
Thank you. Thank you very much to this panel. I do have a few questions. I guess let's start with I'll start with, I think it's Mr. Pepe. Can you clarify whether signing an electronic document means using a e-signature such as DocuSign or other similar platforms?
Yeah, the legislation is not technologically specific. Any form of you can use a tangible signature, or you can use an electronic signature, and any type of electronic signature would be acceptable. But of course, the parties to a transaction using an electronic signature have the ability and to enact security features to ensure the integrity of that signature. And when using electronic documents, that is typically a process that occurs.
Okay, so to Ms. Nelson and Ms. Kitt, I believe I heard you indicate that you would be supporting this part of the law. Am I correct in that you feel comfortable enough that the law will permit the recording of the signing as a way to verify, and therefore you feel comfortable? I'm trying to get to this issue of undue pressure or what concerns that you may have had.
Right. We did discuss that in my office, and we are definitely in agreement that the recorded video call, which will produce an audit trail of the signing, which should be sufficient to ensure, or you can't ensure anything, but would help to reduce the potential for any type of undue influence.
All right. And Ms. Kitt, AARP has you relaxed your concerns. Is the method,
Yes.
is the message that you're giving us today?
Yes, definitely. Like I said in my testimony, you can never completely eliminate every risk, right? But we have so many seniors that we represent that are in nursing homes, that are homebound. And so we just want to make sure as safely as possible that there is an option available. Of course, there's never a way to completely eliminate a risk, but with some of the adjustments that have been made to, preserve security, we feel, comfortable in supporting this.
Okay, so now then I have to ask this question. So currently, without this law, what happens in a nursing home? I'm in the nursing home, you need my signature, I'm not mobile. So what happens?
So I will tell you from my working knowledge, and then defer to Tina, who I know works directly on this issue.
Yes.
So I will speak specifically to some of the challenges that we've heard. So from our perspective, there's been individuals who want to transition out of the nursing home, right? And so there are many challenges with affordability of mobile notarization services. And then also, people feeling, defeated, not being able to, move about the community, leave the nursing home, especially with the pandemic, to be able to go and, engage in those services so that they can either transition out of the community, take care of personal affairs. And so, we have several of our residents that we represent who work closely with legal counsel for the elderly. And so this is a recurring theme. I will let Tina speak to the specifics about how that actually plays out on the legal end.
Thank you. Ms. Nelson.
Thank you. Prior to the pandemic, we actually traveled to the nursing homes. We have an attorney with our Project Help, which is our homebound elderly project, and she would travel to the nursing home with a notary and with witnesses to execute those documents. When the pandemic hit and everything closed down, both within LCE and the nursing homes, as things started to open up, we were able to have some access to the nursing homes if they were able to get a resident of the nursing home on a first floor conference room. And we were literally passing documents back and forth through a window where the LCE staff, the notary, the witnesses would be on the outside and the patient would be on the inside, and we were doing it that way. So with this passage of RON, this would create an opportunity for those individuals in nursing homes through assistance from the social workers there to actually log in and have those documents notarized. And so this would actually, in cases where, public health crises occur in the future, would actually enable those individuals to continue having their documents signed and notarized. And also it would have an impact on the court system as well, because when individuals are able to have those documents notarized and prepared while they still have capacity, then that relieves someone from the family or from the community then filing guardianship petitions and conservatorship petitions with the court when the individuals, while they still have capacity, while we're able to reach them, to get these documents notarized as well.
Okay, this of course your responses lead me to that Old Faithful a question. Well, the issue of influence or being influenced, it happens anyway. It can happen anyway. And so that seemed to have been one of the major barriers in the past. And so I don't think any of us can really address that because that's the way it is. You never know where the influence is coming from, but as far as a process, you're very comfortable with the recorded process of the transaction. Okay, and the other system is using specific questions to verify the identity of the signer. Okay, so that
Yes.
helps us. Thank you. Ms. Gateka, I don't want to leave you out, and I hope I did better with your name because I had it here as Dadeki, okay? And so please forgive me. I butchered it handsomely.
It's completely fine.
Well, all right. I wanted to ask you, what might be the implementation process that the government has to be concerned with? Have you any thoughts on that?
In terms of regulations or in terms of?
In terms of the process of actually the transaction, I would imagine it does require a computerized process. And so just wondered, you work with many of the states. I guess I should also ask this, Mr. Pepe, because of his vast knowledge, but just wondered on a practical side, how does this really work?
Sure. So one of the things with Notarize and most vendors in this space is that, the ability to implement remote online notarization transactions can be done with a mobile device, cell phone, or your computer, desktop computer. But again, if you have a cell phone, you can also transact using a cell phone. So it's very convenient. It also works if a person doesn't have the best internet as well. And so again, I think the key component, which several of the folks here today had touched upon and which I wanted to really highlight is the security features and the steps involved to really verify the identity of the signer and to really make it a seamless process. So from an implementation standpoint, around the country, for the most part, you're going to see some of those typical standards, such as a multi-layered approach for identity verification, as well as obviously the audio-video recording, audit trails, and things like that. And so from the implementation side, it's pretty quick. And then as far as it's really going to be up to whether the secretary wants to promulgate rules around what's already in statute and provide further clarification or guidance, and it varies. But the person from the commission might have a little bit more specifics.
Yeah, if I could add, what the legislation requires in terms of implementation is simply that a notary advise the commissioning officer that the notary intends to perform notarizations by means of audiovisual communication and to identify a technology that the notary is going to be using for those audiovisual communications and identity proofing. Beyond that, the legislation would require that technology to be consistent with any standards that the district may adopt, but it does not require the district to adopt any such standards. But if the district does adopt standards, it provides that the district should consider the standards that have been adopted in other jurisdictions so as to make the district standards consistent with those of other states and consistent with national standards. In terms of actual implementation, there are a variety of different vendors who provide services and do a fine job. In my state of Pennsylvania, for example, we have a process whereby before a particular service vendor can be used, they need to be put on a list of approved service vendors by our Department of State. The legislation does not require that, but if the district felt that was desirable, they could do that. But in my experience, these vendors like Notarize and others really do an excellent job. And it's vastly superior to face-to-face notarization in terms of its security and reliability.
Thank you very much for those comments. As you both were speaking on this matter, I was thinking about how the cell phone seems to be needed or utilized frequently to record the transaction. And one of the points I think you made, Ms. Kitt and Ms. Nelson, is that we need to have perhaps an alternative. So I wonder if the alternative could be not to say we would not use the cell phone, but not everyone may have a cell phone. And if it is a real emergency, would verification be done or could be done by a telephone call where the notary is asking everyone who they are and whatever I wondered if that's possible. What do anyone think? Mr. Pepe, what do you think? Is that possible?
Well, it's currently drafted. The legislation requires simultaneous audio-visual communication and a record of that simultaneous audio-visual communication. And to verify the identity of the individual requires at least the use of 2 identity proofing processes or services. Now, what constitutes an identity proofing process or service is fairly wide open. The only requirement is that it must be based on some review of available public or private data. Now, that review could be accomplished in a variety of different ways. And, I presume that it might be possible to do certain portions of that process as not part of the audiovisual session to set up, for example, a database that has fingerprints in it or something like that. But for now, it was felt very important. It was felt to be very important that you retain a record of the session and that the session, record the actual performance of the notarial act.
So, Madam Chair, the short answer would be no to your question. To just do it by the phone.
You can do it just by the phone?
So that it
Cannot.
would not work.
It would not
Just-
work.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Even if at this location, you could get fingerprints, as Mr. Pepe says, and those papers could follow because the signature paper will follow, or the X, and the fingerprint. If all of that is submitted as a package without a video recording, and you have maybe a subset of witnesses that sign, would all of that package be considered a bona fide verification of the transaction?
I think it would be very difficult.
Yeah.
Let me point out that, you don't need to use a cell phone. I mean, you just need to have some sort of, computerized device to communicate. And if an individual does not have a cell phone or a computer, it certainly might be possible to travel to a public library or to, another place that, offers these services to have an editorial act performed. Now, of course, the need to travel to a library would make it more difficult for somebody who's homebound or, in long-term
Yes.
care. But, many long-term care facilities would certainly, I can't imagine a long-term care facility without access to computers.
Well, I agree with you, but it could very well be that, let's say the person is in a hospice, a private home sort of setting, and they just don't have that kind of electronic equipment. So I'm just sort of trying to be creative here and think about how the transaction can still take place and it be considered legal and of course acceptable. So, well, Miss Nelson, I see. Thank you. All right.
I did want to just add, we do recognize that, not all of our clients would be able to avail themselves to this new technology. So there are going to be some people who just can't use it for various reasons. But in terms of the actual cell phone requirement, I haven't gone through the process, but I know one of the notaries in our office did. And what she advised was the issue wasn't that the client didn't have a cell phone. The issue was that the cell phone was not in the client's name. And so that was not then taken to be meeting the requirement. So I guess if there's some kind of language that could say, as long as a person can avail themselves to a cell phone, because the client's son or daughter was actually paying the bill. And so the cell phone was actually in their name, but that prevented them from having the ability to use the online notary services. So some kind of language change that would address that issue might be sufficient.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I asked that question because when we were talking earlier about the states that have not adopted it, I don't know the case, but I do know that we mentioned some very rural communities where I know that there's always concern about having the internet in some of our very rural communities. And I was just curious as to if there had been another platform in place that could manage telephone verification as an example. All right, Miss Gotecki.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Just two points that I wanted to note. One is just to emphasize that remote online notarization is essentially another tool for the notaries to access and utilize when conducting notarizations, and to do those all electronically on any type of mobile device. So it doesn't have to be a cell phone, as long as you have a mobile device of some type. And it's important to note that we're not trying to replace the traditional model. That will still remain. So to kind of to your point, where if for some reason a person preferred having the notary in person or to meet in person to conduct the notarization, that process will continue to exist. This just allows another alternative for the notary to be able to execute using remote online notarization as another method. And then to the attorney's comment about noting and amending the law to reference a cell phone, I don't know necessarily you want to do that. I think, I think some further discussion around that, but maybe perhaps just referencing a mobile device, because then again, that keeps it open to other technologies, et cetera, to be able to conduct remote online notarizations. But again, I think both would be addressed through still having the traditional model. This law just allows for the ability to have remote online notarization available for notaries to access in DC.
All right, and my final question, big one for the panel. What is the distinction between remote notary and online notary?
Absolutely none.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you to this panel, and we will hear from our government witnesses in a very few minutes. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Again, I want to thank our public witnesses for taking time out of their day to share their perspectives on this important legislation and the issues that this bill aims to address. Now we're going to hear from government witnesses, the Secretary of the District of Columbia, and I believe she is joined by Mr. James Mackay, who is chair of the DC Uniform Law Commission. So happy to swear you both in. If you will raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm that your testimony and any statements that you make before us today to be truthful and complete?
I do.
All righty. And we will begin with the secretary. Secretary, okay, now we can hear you. All righty.
I was excited.
All right. That's
Good
okay.
morning, Chairperson Bonds, council members, members of the committee, staff, and the residents of the District of Columbia. My name is Kimberly Bassett, and I'm Secretary of State of the District of Columbia. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Bill 24-0457, the Revised Uniform Law on Notarial Acts Amendment of 2021. As introduced, this bill would allow for use of remote notarization through two methods: the use of secured electronic records and the use of paper documents signed in person, notarized, and then delivered to parties. Updating our notary laws to allow for remote notarization recognizes the changing technological landscape and keeps pace with the 21st century. Further, as we've seen over the past 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way in which we live, work, do business with one another. In adapting to the changes we had to make in order to keep our communities safe throughout the pandemic, many businesses and several state governments transitioned to working remotely and enabling electronic processes. The Office of the Secretary understands the important need for remote notarization in the current environment and has followed the progress of remote notarization laws in other jurisdictions. At the present time, 40 states have authorized some form of e-notarization, and 34 of these states have a law that allows for a remote e-notarization. Approximately half of these states have developed rules and regulations on remote e-notarization to reflect on the updated national e-notarization standards, while the rest of the states are in the progress. So during COVID-19, conducting business virtually or in a hybrid posture became what we refer to as the new normal. Even as employers start bringing employees back to work to their offices, the residents feel comfortable returning to a pre-pandemic routine. And the increased use of technology for conducting business, it's not likely to change. So while we support this bill, the Office of the Notary Commissions and Authentications, which we refer to as ANCA, will require more time than is allotted under the current version in order to properly implement its provisions. Currently, the district is finalizing the implementation of electronic notarization, which we hope to be completed in the upcoming months. Following that, we would begin working to make the necessary changes to allow for remote notarization. ANCA would, however, need additional resources to make the need changes to implement remote notarization. So thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. This concludes my testimony, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and we'll now hear from Mr. Mackay.
Thank you. Let me just get my testimony here. Good afternoon. I'm James Mackay, Chair of the District of Columbia Uniform Law Commission, and I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to testify in support of Bill 24-0457, the Revised Uniform Law Notarial Acts Amendment Act of 2021. I won't repeat what others have said, but in 2018, the Council enacted the Revised Uniform Law Notarial Acts of 2018. As noted, the section permitting remote notarization was omitted. Now, that might have been understandable. In 2018, only several states permitted remote notarization. However, this situation dramatically changed soon thereafter and has accelerated in the last 2 years as a result of the COVID pandemic. Today, a great majority of states have permitted legislation permitting remote notarization, including Maryland and Virginia. Now, you've heard there's a great need for secure remote notarization in the district. It'll serve in the important public health objective of protecting individuals from COVID, substantially improve the convenience and efficiency of transactions at reduced costs, and benefits consumers of notarial services by the ease of access to these services and the savings of time, lost wages, and travel costs. In many, as you've heard, in many cases, it is difficult for some individuals who need documents notarized to appear physically before a notary public, such as elderly or disabled residents or district residents who are members of the military, and even those who are in the district. You know, you might pay an awful lot to get a notary public to appear. I want to use an example. My mother, Mary Ann Mackay, who was born in the district in 1921, and she lives in a nursing home in Oregon Avenue Northwest, and she's over 100, and she and many hundreds of the district residents are not mobile. And moreover, inviting strangers into a highly secure nursing home with strict protocols about who can be there creates health and logistical problems. Yet she and many fellow DC residents who are elderly occasionally need notarial services, healthcare directives, Medicaid notarizations, and things like that. As noted, the bill contains robust protections against fraud and undue influence, which enables the notary and remote individual to hear and see each other interactively in real time, and the audiovisual recording of the session with the notary must be retained for at least 10 years. The legislation would authorize use of two distinct types of remote notarization. One, secure remote online notarization using electronic documents as provided in the original Uniform Act. And two, an additional method, remote ink-signed notarization. Both processes would utilize secure audiovisual technology and would obviate the need for the parties to the transaction to come to the same location. Remote online notarization applies to a document that is stored in an electronic medium, such as a computer file, but which is in a perceivable form and can be viewed on a computer monitor or paper printout. The official notarial seal or stamp is affixed or associated with the electronic record. Now, remote ink signed notarization, like remote online notarization, enables notarization with the signer and notary in separate locations. But instead of using an electronic document, the individual signs a paper document. Now, the document may be notarized in this matter, whether it is in the physical possession of the individual or the notary. In the first case, the individual would sign the document and send it to the notary. After receiving the document, the notary would display it to the individual, and the individual would identify it as the record that was signed. In the second case, the individual who has physical possession of the document would display to the notary and sign the document and a declaration that the record is the same record to be notarized while the notary is watching. The individual would then send the document and declaration to the notary. On receipt, the notary would execute a notarial certificate. In either case, the individual would obtain a notarized paper document without the need to appear physically before the notary. And that's remote ink notarization. In sum, Bill 24-0457 promotes consumer choice, protects individuals from unnecessary exposure to COVID, saves consumers time and expense, and provides a convenient means of obtaining notarial services for individuals who are physically impaired or elderly or members of the military serving the country in distant places. Therefore, we urge the committee to report favorably on Bill 24-0457, the revised Uniform Law Notarial Acts Amendment Act of 2021. And I would be pleased to answer any questions.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you both very much for your testimony. It looks like we have a full court press today on this bill, that everyone is supporting it. The question is, how can we propose to get it implemented? And of course, the secretary has indicated some concerns about timing and how quickly her office could do that if we were able to get an affirmative vote through the council. So I do have a couple of questions. I guess let's start with, has the Office of Notary begun implementing remote and online notary services, Madam Secretary?
Currently, the office is in the process of implementing e-notarization. And once we implement e-notarization, the office will modify the rules, they'll update the handbook, they'll train staff with a new process, and they'll get the website application ready. So we anticipate this process is going to probably take a couple of months after e-notarization has been implemented.
Okay, so it will take a couple of months. So if the law is passed, and we're talking about during this fiscal year, we could actually implement the law.
Yes.
Provided Congress does what it has to do with all of our bills. Okay, all right. So it could be. You mentioned the computer system. Is there a specialized system that you need in order to handle this type of transaction?
So yes, we do have a specific company who has built the e-notary platform. And so we will have to build upon the current platform in order to execute remote notary.
Okay, so what is the current platform that is used?
I would have to get back to you on the exact question, but we do have a platform. The director who's leading the effort, Director Judy Gold, is on the phone. Can you answer that question, Judy? What is the actual platform that we use? Okay, council member, I'll get back to you.
Okay, all right, a little technical challenge here. All right, please, I'd like to know the current platform and its capacity, and what kind of modifications would be necessary so that you could
I'm sorry, we
go
do
right
use,
ahead.
we do use the on-base platform, but we'll have to build upon it to do remote notarization.
Okay, so within 10 days, could you please get back to me regarding the capacity of the current platform and what modifications would be necessary in order to implement this law, if this bill, if it becomes law?
Yes, absolutely.
All righty. And it may also require, I'm not sure, but maybe additional personnel. So, you know, we're in the
Yes,
budget season,
definitely.
so please let us know.
I'm on if you wanted to ask. I'm sorry, I had to find my unmute.
That's fine. Please go right ahead, Ms. Gold.
And I will mostly defer to the secretary, but we have a platform that's Highland Utility Client, and the software is called OnBase. It has the platform for e-notary. We would need to upgrade it to also allow a platform for registering for remote notaries, so that we would know who all the remote notaries are. For the e-notaries, they would also have to apply to become an e-notary. And that's part of the process to make sure our electronic notarizations are all up and running. But we will obviously respond to you in more detail in writing in the 10 days.
All right, well, your point is very important because earlier an expert representing the Uniform Law Commission of Pennsylvania, Mr. Pepe, made it very clear that the issue of online and remote, that they are virtually the same, that there's no difference. So I would love to get something from you all in writing so that we understand precisely what is the difficulty and how do you define remote and online?
Remote and online are the same. Remote and in-person electronic notarizations are not the same.
Okay, so you currently have e-notary capacity.
I'll defer to the secretary.
All right.
We've built the platform, council member, but as I said, we just have to update the handbook. We have to train the staff, and we have to get the website application ready.
Okay, but you do have a platform that currently does electronic notary.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Let's see what else. Are there proposed changes in this legislation, Mr. Mackay and Ms. Bassett, that the public should expect that would make it more functional? You've heard the previous two panels mention, you know, bits and pieces here and there, the issue with the cell phone, really the issue with how do you get the process recorded for me, if you do not have a cell phone.
Well, we do plan to make suggestions in the rulemakings. We definitely do have some changes that we would like to make, but that's something that I can discuss, you know, in our report, our 10-day report that we give you.
Okay, Mr. Mackay, did you see some changes that are necessary to the current bill?
Madam Chairperson, no, I think the bill provides tremendous flexibility. It is not technologically, it is technologically neutral, and it provides a tremendous amount of flexibility. And I would not suggest any changes to the language of the bill. I think that, I mean, certainly, it can be clarified by rulemaking, but I don't think very much rulemaking is necessary to implement the bill. I mean, my experience, with my mother being in a nursing home for about, 8 years, is that at least the staff of Knollwood, has all sorts of, iPads and cell phones and things to allow the residents to communicate with their family. And I just think that if there's a problem with that ability, I'm sure that either the legal counsel for the elderly or AARPDC or some other organizations in the district would make sure that the elderly residents have the capacity for a remote notarization. I don't think it's a very major requirement. I mean, it's not a major need, because I think most nursing homes have that already, or he could fairly easily obtain it. So I do not think there are any changes would be necessary in the language of Bill 24-0457.
Okay, so in other words, you're saying that you're comfortable with the bill as is, and that leads me to asking, do jurisdictions and legal entities accept the legitimacy of electronic notifications that are without the embossing and ink signature of the notary?
I might want to, Ray Pepe might be able to answer that better, since he is the chair or co-chair of the drafting committee, and he probably has a lot of experience with a lot of other states. But I think the districts, the policies in the bill before you have been widely adopted throughout the United States. And I think the advantage of the Uniform Act is much more flexible than any other act, and would allow a lot of addressing the problems different ways. But Mr. Pepe might have more to say about this.
Yeah, could you
Mr.
clarify
Pepe.
the question again, please?
Yes, I'm asking if jurisdictions and legal entities accept the legitimacy of electronic notifications that are without the embossing and ink signature of the notary.
Yeah, well, we're sort of, conflating a couple of different issues here. One is the acceptance of electronic records and electronic signatures as a substitute for tangible records and written signatures. And there's a separate law called the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act that grants electronic records and electronic signatures the same legal status and recognition as written records and tangible signatures, provided that the parties to a transaction agree that they're going to be using, electronic records or electronic signatures. So people always have the discretion to decide in a particular transaction whether or not they're going to be using an electronic record or electronic signature. Now, with respect to specifically whether remote notifications, remote notarizations are accepted, it varies, but, generally most major businesses do accept them. And keep in mind that under current district law, a notarization performed in any other jurisdiction is recognized for legal purposes within the district as long as it complies with the law of the jurisdiction in which the Notarial Act was performed. And that relates to the location of the notary when the act is performed, not the location of an individual who appears before the notary using audiovisual communication.
Thank you very much. That was important distinction. Thank you so much. How many IDs should be required to ensure the authenticity of the signer?
As this legislation is drafted, it requires the use of at least 2 different methods of identity proofing. And identity proofing can be done in a variety of different ways. It can be done based on a review of an identification card, a photo identification card, for example. We typically refer to that as credential analysis. It could be done based on what you refer to as knowledge-based authentication, whereby the remotely located individual is asked to answer some questions that only that person is likely to know the answer to. The identity of an individual can also be identified simply based on the personal knowledge of the notary. Yeah, I know that person. Or, the identity be verified based on the oath or affirmation of a witness appearing before the notary that knows that person. So there are a number of different ways to do identity proofing, and the legislation does not impose any restrictions on the types of technologies that might be used, except, of course, before a notary can begin performing remote notarizations, they have to advise their commissioning officer that they intend to do so and identify a technology that they will be using. And if the notarial commissioning officer chooses to adopt any standards or adopt any rules, that technology would have to comply with those technologies and rules. At least in my experience, I think the vendors are doing a really excellent job providing, good platforms. And I'd be personally satisfied with the fact that if problems with particular platforms arise, at that point in time, the commissioning officer could step in and prohibit the use of that particular platform or adopt standards. But for now, I think it's working, really, really quite well. And again, in terms of, the reliability of identifying an individual and preserving records regarding the Notarial Act, I think much better than face-to-face notarization.
All right. Well,
anybody can fake an ID card, and you don't know who somebody is when they walk in, and you don't know what sort of pressure they may have been imposed upon them to do a particular act before they walk in the room. The best you can do is know what happens in the room, and in this case, you're going to be recording a session of it and keeping that record for 10 years. Not a lot of people want to commit fraud online with their fraudulent acts being recorded.
All right. Well, I thank you for that response. I thought we needed to at least indicate to the public what is, the types of ID that would be required for this bill. I think we have pretty much ready to sum up our hearing today. I want to thank our public witnesses for taking time out of their day, as I mentioned earlier, and I want to thank our government witnesses as well. And I want to thank everyone in total for those who are listening in. And say to the public, if any additional thoughts or any information that you would like to submit as written testimony regarding today's legislation, please email it to housing@dccouncil.us, and it will be included in the hearing record. The record will close on Monday, March 14th, 2022 at 5 p.m. And the committee's next meeting will be on Monday, March 21, 2022 at 12 o'clock p.m., 12 noon. It will be a budget oversight hearing on the Department on Aging and Community Living. And with that, I want to thank our government witnesses and Mr. Pepe, who joined us from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for being here with us today. This concludes today's hearing, and with that, The time is 12:35 p.m. on the 7th of March, 2022. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pepe.